Okay, so I thought I had like 15 minutes of content recorded, but it turns out that's 50 minutes. So what I will be doing is I will be creating multiple videos where I go through the story of Harandar, but more so the history behind the Haranir and how they came to be the Haranir. And also we're going to trace back how the Cradle came to be with the different world trees. And why there are some timeline contradictions that we need to speak about if we are to understand what Aln'hara might be and why she's connected with Azeroth. Although, to be fair, this is not going to be some kind of a revelation video, just so you know. None of these videos are supposed to be revelation related. Only the writers can direct us towards some sort of revelation at this point, because the story of World of Warcraft is just so interlinked and it could honestly go anywhere at this point. But I am going to be making like multiple videos, talking about the connections, talking about the patterns, explaining some of the story potentially, and going from there. The first of these videos is going to be about Harandar and the Haranir, and when did they actually end up becoming the Haranir, because they actually have a history being dark trolls, or maybe not necessarily dark trolls, but some kind of a troll race that ended up becoming the Haranir. Okay, so the first thing that we need to talk about is how did Haranir people came to be? Like, how did they end up on Harandar? And the first thing that we learn, based on the lore that we are given so far, is that they were living as probably trolls in Mount Hyjal, which is located around here. And then a group of them heard the song, which is Aln'hara's song. So looking at their ancient past in the WoW wiki, what we learn is that the Haranir once lived on Mount Hyjal, hiding in the forest and unknown even to Freya, who dwelt on the mountains with the wild gods. At some point after 16,000 BDP, the Haranir grew restless and searched for a new purpose. Some turned their gazes upwards towards the stars and the moon, so these are the Night Elves. But others, such as the Harati, heard a call from deep within the world. Those Haranir would travel to Harandar and discover a new purpose, which is what they discovered with Aln'hara and everything. Now, the term BDP we saw earlier basically means before the Dark Portal. So that was 16,000 years before the Dark Portal. Now, when we speak about the Dark Portal, this does not mean the Burning Crusade expansion. In fact, the Burning Crusade expansion was the third opening of the Dark Portal. Before that, we had the Ner'zhul opening the Dark Portal. And before that, we had the first opening, which was done by Medivh, while he was possessed by Sargeras. So this is pretty far back. In fact, this takes us so far back to Warcraft 2, actually, Tides of Darkness, which was when the Dark Portal first made its debut in the World of Warcraft franchise. So this entire Harandar thing happens all the way back 16,000 years before the events of Warcraft 2. We look at the roots, and this is what essentially forms the cradle. The roots come from the world trees. The world trees are essentially these big trees on Azeroth, and there's quite a few of them. One of them being Nordrassil in Mount Hyjal. That's Nordrassil. Another being Teldrassil, all the way here, and there's a whole no, sorry, not that one, but I can't select it because it's basically burnt away, which there's a whole quest line here and a side quest revolving around Teldrassil and how it's been burnt and everything. So the tree that was actually light bloom corrupted, if you will, light infused, if you will, these roots over here, those are from Shaladrassil, I believe it was called. So that is over in the Broken Isles, Valshara. I believe this is Shaladrassil, who was also which was also void corrupted, right? Which, we had the anti-raid and Rift of Aln thing going on in Legion expansion. So if the roots are affected, it might have something to do with like a future expansion or a patch. Then we might have to deal with Shaladrsil again, but this time, instead of dealing with the Nightmare version of it, we're dealing with like a Light Bloom infested version of it. We don't know yet, but this is just like speculation. But this is overall to say that essentially the Cradle is made up of the roots of the world trees. You can see how they connect over here from Shaladrsil, and they basically connect over to the Cradle itself. Now we could follow each of the different branches or roots and basically move towards that way. There's, however, something very weird about this timeline-wise, because as we said, the Haranir came here at 16,000 years before the Dark Portal, the first version of the Dark Portal. And you may ask, okay, why is this weird? Why is 16,000 before the Dark Portal weird when it comes to the Cradle and Aln'hara and the Song and the Haranir? The weirdness part comes from the fact that, for example, trees like Nordrassil did not exist back then. 16,000 years ago, before the Dark Portal, did not exist. Nordrassil came later. Teldrassil came way later. Vordrassil, I think, is speculated to be around 4,000 years or 4,500 years before the Dark Portal, which means that a lot of these roots, they did not exist, which means that the Cradle was not here, or it did not exist in this current state that we see it, at least. The only trees that really we pretty much know for a fact that at least existed to some capacity are three, with the third one being a bit speculative. We're not really sure if that actually existed either. Number one is Haranir, however you want to call it. So Haranir is basically also called the Mother Tree and the Great Bow. It is a domain of the wild god Aviana. It is located in the Emerald Dream. So even if Haranir existed, it was actually not in the real world. It only existed in the Emerald Dream. So over here, you would not probably be able to see it unless this place is a place between realms, possibly, and the Emerald Dream and reality actually are conjoined in this realm, so to speak, right? So essentially, you would not be able to see Haranir's roots in reality, at the very least. We also have never really seen Haranir, as far as I'm aware, within World of Warcraft. We may have only seen something in relation to it back in Legion, and it is not to be confused with the actual Legion artifact that the Restoration Druids get, because it's under the same name, unfortunately, because this makes things a little bit more complicated. But essentially, Haranir itself is a world tree. It just exists in the Emerald Dream. It's died, but it's been renewed as far as we know. In terms of the story of Haranir, what we know, or at least what we've been told, is that Freya was the one who shaped it within the Emerald Dream as the first thing that she actually created. And even though I mentioned earlier that Haranir was not an actual place in reality or a tree in reality, and by the way, whenever I say reality, I basically mean the physical plane, the one that the player character mostly resides in. It still doesn't mean that these two planes don't coexist and don't interact with each other. There's multiple times where the Dream and the Emerald Nightmare have influenced the physical world as well. Now, what is interesting here is that we are told that Freya created Haranir, essentially, but at the same time we are told that the Haranir were hiding, or not just the Haranir, but the elves, or the to-be elf civilization was hiding from Freya at Mount Hyjal. Nordrassil did not exist at that time. Freya, who we also see in the storyline of Midnight when we do the Haranir part, is one of the Titanic keepers, and is essentially the vessel or the avatar of Eonar. So we're told that Freya basically created Haranir, but it seems like she also created the Emerald Dream itself during the Ordering of Azeroth. Now, this doesn't make much sense. It says that it's a dream born from Azeroth's slumbering world soul, and then Freya tapped into that and molded what would become known as the dream as a way to commune with an ancient titan. Now, it seems to me that essentially the world soul is the one that is actually slumbering and is creating the Emerald Dream. And then why would it say that Freya created the Emerald Dream? Maybe it means that it ordered the Emerald Dream rather than created the Emerald Dream, which makes more sense to me because when you look at the book we find in Aln'hara, basically it has it's something called Edicts of the Prime Designate. When you look at the book we find in Aln'hara, which is called the Edicts of the Prime Designate, one of the more apparent edicts, which is, I believe it was the second one, it says, attribute all accomplishments and works of wonder to the Titans alone. Despite the relentless arguments made by some of you, this is not a fallacy. After all, can anything truly be said to exist until it has been ordered? Of course not. Therefore, it is irrefutable that the Titans are the source of all creation. So when we tie this back to Freya, and when we tie this back to the actual things that we are told about the Titans and where the Emerald Dream came from and all that stuff, it seems to me that when they use the term created here, they essentially mean that Freya ordered the Emerald Dream. The Emerald Dream existed before that, and it also makes apparent that some of the keepers were actually arguing against that point. And then there's also another part of this that personally I don't really like, but it is part of the lore now, so we have to talk about it, and that is the First Ones. Do not share knowledge of the First Ones. Mortals could not conceive the wonders that the Makers granted to the Titans in Zereth Ordis. Thus, learning of the progenitors could only confuse them. It is enough that mortals know the Titans brought order to the cosmos and that they are owed deference. I'm not really sure. Which essentially means that if you think that this whole thing ends with the Titans, unfortunately or fortunately, not really sure at this point, it's not, right? I mean, there's the First Ones, and there's also Zereth Ordis, just like there was Zereth Mortis, etc., etc. So yes, coming back to Haranir, all of this super confusing. I know the lore of World of Warcraft is just so complicated and convoluted, and there's so much drama in it, and you can see how the story is being told through different lenses, I guess. So we have the lenses of the Titans, we have the lenses of the old gods, we have the lenses of the wild gods and the life-aligned entities, and everyone is just telling us their perspective, and that is what makes this whole thing so confusing, because when you work with perspectives like that, one thing from one plane of existence can mean a totally different thing from a different sort of perspective, a different cosmology chart, right? And one of those things, and this is where I'm going to try to tie this all together, is Aln'hara. So this ties back directly with Haranir. You see, Haranir was the first world tree, according to what we know, but it was a world tree that existed in the Emerald Dream, not the real world, not reality, not the physical plane. And so what we learn then is about Aln'hara. And we learn of Aln'hara in the legend of Aln'hara. So this legend of Aln'hara, we actually found it back in Dragonflight, which is also where we found the Edicts of the Prime Designate we were speaking about earlier than that. This legend came a bit later. It was in the Emerald Dream patch, where we actually got to go to the Emerald Dream. I think one of the first times where we actually gone to like a full-on Emerald Dream, to be fair, so it was a pretty big reveal at the time. And it starts with saying that as we gather to defend Amyrdrasil, which is the new Emerald Dream tree, we cannot help but recall the tragic fates of world trees past, those lost to sacrifice, corruption, and flame. Now, this is obviously referring to Cheldrasil. This is probably referring to, I'm assuming, Shaladrasil. Oh no, Vordrasil. Although there are two links. And yeah, Shaladrasil is one of them as well. So there's two of them that have done that. And Sacrifice is apparently Nordrasil. So this is referring to trees that already exist. And there is an ancient tale, some claim it merely a legend, that tells of an earlier world tree that also met a sorrowful fate. Though it lived only a short time, its legacy endures. So long before the first dragons drew breath, which actually coincides a lot with what we were saying earlier, that 16,000 BDP, before the Dark Portal, essentially means that these world trees that we have here, they just didn't exist. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, and we're going to go all the way down here. So it says that our patron titan Eonar carried a gift given to her by Alun, a branch of Haranir, the mother world tree. The titan believed that the influence of life would drive the darkness away. Now, she wanted to drive the darkness away because when they first found Azeroth, it was already pretty much corrupted by the old gods. There was the Black Empire going on over in Azeroth, and that kind of coincides as well with the time before Night Elves and Blood Elves and all that stuff. They were all pretty much, I believe, trolls back then. And that kind of coincides with the 16,000 BDP we mentioned earlier, which was basically when the Haranir first heard the song from Aln'hara and descended down Mount Hyjal. So finally, we reach the point here where it says that she called the tree Aln'hara in honor of her great love. When Aman'Thul saw that what Eonar had done, he chided her. "This is not order," he bellowed. "You have infected this world with uncontrolled chaos." And then the High Father took hold of the world tree's trunk and tore it from the earth. Eonar wept bitter tears down upon the resulting crater, but as she peered down upon the sundered earth, the Titan realized a truth she did not share with the High Father. Though he had destroyed the tree, its winding roots still held firm beneath the soil, hidden from Aman'Thul's gaze. As the force of Titans waged war against the Black Empire, Eonar bid her keeper Freya to watch over the crater and nurture the life that blossomed there. Below ground, the roots fed upon the tears of Eonar and grew strong. The war was long, but in the end the Titans claimed victory, and Eonar was pleased knowing Elun's legacy would endure. It is said that much later, as the world entered a new age, mysterious guardians arrived who dedicated their lives to protecting the roots, but that is a tale for another time. Now let us stand with our lives. Blah, 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 blah. So, essentially, what we have here is that Eonar planted Aln'hara here. Aman'Thul tore it, and mysterious guardians arrived to dedicate their lives to protecting the roots. It is saying much later, but again, this is just pointing towards the roots themselves, not the tree. The tree is gone because Aman'Thul tore it away. There were some roots of Aln'hara here that remained deep within the earth, and I think that this is actually referring to the Haranir people. So when we look back here, there's not really roots, at least as far as I can tell, from a different tree. But then something interesting exists here, which I kind of showcased in the previous video, but not really. You see, this part over here kind of feels like there used to be roots here. And this is where the Rift of Aln is also created. Now, there's also the part here with the wind that also kind of makes it feel like there was some sort of thing here that got destroyed or got ripped apart. There's like a gap here, a gaping area that like feels like the energy should be flowing to. This is the raid boss area, which we showcased last time too. And then when you look at the skybox, it feels like the roots are moving away. They're like moving to that direction, right? And when you come a bit closer here, which is where Nihil was in the last video, you can also see how there are roots in the skybox. Now, I know that this is just a skybox, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the roots are moving towards that direction, but it really feels a bit weird overall. And I think that it does have something to do with Luna here and the roots that we were just speaking about earlier. So there's a lot of other secrets that I've found while exploring the area as well that I'm itching to talk about, but I'm gonna leave that all for next time, because this video is already like 20 minutes long, and I know that, you know, obviously Haranir is not the only thing that I want to be talking about. So hopefully in the next video I'm also going to start talking about some other zones as well. We'll talk a little bit more about the Titans and the different artifacts that exist, and pretty much just go from there. So thank you all for watching this video. If you like this sort of content, please like and subscribe. And this is a new channel. If you guys have any tips and tricks on the microphone and everything, please do let me know. I am working on everything at the same time, so hopefully the videos and their quality is going to be upgraded as we go. So yes, thank you. See you.